Hello writers, come write with me. My name is Mykela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Write with Mykela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is story time, or the day of our chapter exchange. I'm hoping to continue to get chapters from you. Don't leave us hanging. If you've already sent, say, chapters 1 through 5, send us 6. Chapter 6. I've already decided to release 2 videos on Tuesdays to read your writings from the writing prompts, and 2 videos on Friday to read your chapters for those of you where I have permission to read them on the channel. So basically your work will be extra videos, but everything else will be the same for my viewers. If you're writing with me and you wish to exchange chapters, then I need written permission to read your chapter on the channel, along with your name or your pen name and age. I also need permission from your parent or legal guardian if you're under 18 years of age. If you're under 18 years old and have guardian permission, then I will need a pen name to read your material. Writers may send their chapters in PDF or Word document format to writewithmykela@gmail.com. That's WRITEWITHMYKELA@gmail.com. Please do not send Google Docs. I'm not making any promises to read every chapter sent to me on the channel, but I intend to read all the chapters sent. All chapters read on Friday, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own stories. I want to remind everyone that this story is at least PG-13, meaning if you are under 13 years of age, you need parental guidance. The story is in its rough draft stage and needs many more passes of edits, but we will read it together. As you know, the title of the story is City of the Ancients, and today we are reading chapter 11. Let's start. Chapter 11, Questioning. The 8th evening, they stopped earlier than they had on the previous days. After Kirian lit the fire, he and Kirsha used a net and caught some fish. When they returned to the campfire, Kilty was crying. "What's wrong, Kilty?" asked Kirsha, as she immediately worried that Kilty was in more pain from her injury. "I can't work any of my spells," Kilty cried. Kirsha sighed. "Okay. Stop crying and I will help you," stated Kirsha. Kirsha got out Kilty's book. She read the first spell. "Wasser boile with the boilers. Come to Wasser a Wasser mi trulas. Wasser timmer ferra fruma mi tisa dia. Sa ya kanen strada o mi verdga ona mi plia." Kirsha read it again. Then she asked Kilty, "What is troubling you?" "I told you," whined Kilty. "I can't work any spells." No. "What is troubling you around here?" Kirsha asked as she motioned. "Nothing. Why?" asked Kilty. Kirsha got up and found a rock. She handed it to Kilty. "Sit on this." Kilty looked at Kirsha strangely, but she complied. "Now, does that bother you? Does that cause you trouble?" asked Kirsha. "Yes, it hurts," complained Kilty. She leaned to the side to remove the rock. Don't touch it," stated Kirsha. "You say the spell first." Kilty repeated the spell after Kirsha. She tried to repeat Kirsha's exact intonation. After she said the spell, everything was quiet. Kilty was disappointed. Then suddenly, to the east of their camp, a huge wave of water rose up out of the ground and barreled towards them with speed and might. Kilty went rolling as the wave washed beneath her. The huge wave knocked Kirian and Kirsha from their feet, and it extinguished the fire. Luckily, the horse and wagon were far enough away for the wave to miss them. The wave roared out to the sea. All three stared at the wave. "Kilty!" scolded Kirsha teasingly. "You must be more careful." Kilty had a huge grin on her face. "I did it! I removed the rock from underneath me. I felt a happiness swell within me." "Kilty, get the stuff to change your bandage," instructed Kirian sternly. Kilty went right away to the wagon. When Kilty was out of hearing, Kirian said, "From now on, I help Kilty. Did you add your magic to hers?" "No, I don't think I did," stated Kirsha. "I felt badly for her, and I wished very much that she could work the spell. I was determined to stay up all night if necessary." "Kirsha, from now on, you pay attention, close attention, to your wishes," stated Kirian earnestly. "You need to control your magic. You have absolutely no control." "Kirian, you're not being fair to me or Kilty," defended Kirsha. "My magic isn't bad, and Kilty deserves to have magic." "Kirsha," said Kirian with a raised voice and through clenched teeth, "you aren't listening to me. Your wish almost washed Kilty out to sea. As it is, her wound is wet." Kirsha looked down. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. "I didn't want to hurt Kilty. I wanted to help her." Tears welled up in her eyes and dripped down her face. Kirian embraced her. "I know, Kirsha. I know. I want to help her too. But she needs to use her own magic on her own." He lifted Kirsha's chin. "Okay?" Kirsha slightly nodded her head. "Okay," she agreed. Kirian gently kissed her. He whispered, "I love you." He felt her muscles tense up. "I'm not going to hurt you." She hugged him and leaned her head against his chest. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I'm trying. Honest, I am. I don't tell my body to be scared. It just is." Kirian petted her. "I know you're trying. Let me kiss you again." "Let me kiss you deeply," he suggested. She gripped his shirt tightly in her hands and pressed her head more firmly into his chest. He stood patiently for a minute. Then he pushed her back. He lifted her chin and kissed her. "Are you making sex?" asked Kilty. Kirsha and Kirian jumped. They had forgotten about Kilty. Kirian chuckled. "No, Kilty, we are not making sex. We are just kissing. It's one way we show each other that we love each other." "Oh," replied Kilty. "Well, are you going to make—" Kilty stopped. She looked at Kirsha. "Are you going to make a baby?" "No, Kilty, we aren't," replied Kirsha. "We want to help you first before we make a baby. We don't want me to be pregnant while we are traveling." "Oh," replied Kilty. "Will you make a boy or a girl when you make a baby?" Kirian laughed. "Kilty, the awesome decides if the baby is a boy or a girl. Parents get what the awesome gives them. And that is enough questions for tonight. You hang the wet blankets over the sides of the wagon, find a dry blanket, and go to sleep." "Yes, Dad," replied Kilty. "I'm not Dad, remember," stated Kirian. "Sorry, I forgot." Kilty ran off to do as Kirian had asked. "Now, where were we?" teased Kirian. Kirsha pushed against his grip. "Kirian, please stop. That's enough for tonight." "Kirsha, you are my wife. You can at least kiss me. That cannot hurt you. I'd even bet that when Dante beat you, he did not kiss you." "Kirian," Am I wrong? Pressed Kirian. No, stated Kirsha. Then kiss me. Don't be afraid to show me that you love me. Kirsha shook, but she complied with his wish. Kirian kissed her several times before he released her. He watched her. He thought of Kirsha's words to Kilty, that women don't usually get pregnant after having sex only once, but they can. So we should not risk it. Even if I get her to the point of being ready for that, I cannot get her pregnant until we return home. Kirian built another fire. Though Kirsha and Kilty had gone to bed already, Kirian cooked the fish so they could eat it tomorrow. Plus, if he cooked it, then it wouldn't spoil as quickly. They traveled south for 4 more days. At the end of the 4th day, they came to the Taurissus River. They would follow the river southeast to Castle West Polk. Kirian approached Kirsha for their nightly kiss. Kirsha watched him. She knew why he was approaching. He looked so happy to her. She wanted to know what he thought of her. So without consciously thinking, she raised her hand to the side of his head as he embraced her. She ran her slender fingers through his thick hair. Kirian realized her relaxed state, so he paused. He enjoyed her gentle caresses. Then both saw and thought what Kirian saw and thought. This startled Kirian at first, but he opened up to her. At first, they traveled back in time to their picnics, until one picnic stood out. It was the picnic when Kirian suddenly felt a great urge to return home. He had been thinking about what gift he could give a woman like Kirsha, who was so beautiful, and finally he knew what it was: a headboard. Then time flowed backward until they went back to the ship. At this point, Kirian had a strong sense of not being worthy of Kirsha or Kilty. Kirsha wondered about this. To her, Kirian always seemed so strong and relaxed. She never knew about his lack of confidence. They proceeded further back in time, into Kirian's childhood. Arisha had stopped to check her orb. She saw Kirian and Kirsha. She became excited. She held up her orb and exclaimed, "Oh, my people, look! Kirsha is using Xantrix with the Kirian." In her excitement, she pulled the orb to her chest and squeezed it. Then, embarrassedly, she raised it back up. Granted, Kirian is allowing this, but Kirsha has no training. Many people gathered around and looked into the glowing emerald green orb. Word quickly spread through the ultrarium. Arik could have checked his orb, but he wanted to share his wife's joy, so he hurried to her. "Dear, look," Arisha said to Arik when he arrived. "I heard, dear," replied Arik. "Does she have her orb out?" "No," exclaimed Arisha. They watched intently. Suddenly, Kirsha pulled back. Anger filled her. "You should not have suffered such." "Kirsha, it's over," said Kirian. He didn't understand her anger, but he certainly felt it. "No, our parents should have never given you away. Never. I hate them for what they've done." "Kirsha," started Kirian. He was going to tell her they were dead. But Kirsha whirled around and shook her fist at the sky. She screamed, "Do you hear me? I hate you. I will never forgive what you have done." Kirian wanted to calm her down, but he felt he couldn't calm her at this point. He headed to Kilty and whispered, "Some people believe you can talk to the dead." Kilty whispered back, "She talks to herself all the time. She's a magic user." Kirian paused, then said, "No, she isn't talking to herself. She's yelling at the dead." He glanced between Kirsha and Kilty. He felt Kirsha might emit uncontrolled magic at any time. So he called to her, "Kirsha, don't release magic here. You might hurt Kilty." Kirsha glanced back. She gripped her fist and groaned aloud. But she walked away from Kirian and Kilty. She walked north out of their camp. Kirian took Kilty to the opposite side of the wagon as an extra precaution. Anger is good, dear, Arik reassured his wife. I know, she said. She tried not to let her people see her shake. We were angry when we learned about our parents leaving us, reminded Arik. I know, but Kirian doesn't know that yet. The crowd parted. Commander Revis and several soldiers were pushing a large sphere to the center of the crowd. They had the sphere nestled in a wooden frame on wheels. Arik convinced Arisha to hand her orb to him. He slipped it in a pocket of his robe, and they walked off, arm in arm. Kirsha walked farther away until she could no longer see Kirian or Kilty. She sat down and took out her orb. It glowed a warm, bright purple light. Kirsha hoped Kirian and Kilty did not see the light. Kirsha said angrily to the stone, "Do you hear me?" Sorry, we're going back to the ultrarium. A lone Kai woman was walking through the city center in the ultrarium. She had worked many long hours on her current research. She was a little hungry and could no longer think. Thus she headed home. When she heard the voice come from the sphere, she stopped mid-stride. She thought to herself that Rimsal's idea must have worked, that this sphere was somewhat a reproduction of the Queen's and King's orbs. The woman walked to the sphere and gently placed her hand on the sphere. She said softly, "Yes, I hear you." Kirsha was confused. So she said, "You are not my mother." "No, your mother is my queen," came the reply. Kirsha was still angry. So she said, "Did you know my mother gave me, my brother, and my sister up?" "Yes, all of us here know. We know what sacrifices they have made leaving the siblings. So we have hope of return." There was a pause. Kirsha thought of how to respond. The voice continued, "I myself have lived to see 3 sets of siblings. You, Kirsha, will be the 4th set. We know your magic is greater than any other set. We hope it is enough to restore our city." "What?" asked Kirsha, confused. "No one said restore. We are coming for Kilty's cure." "I understand Kilty may need to come before you and Kirian, but..." "No, we are coming with her." "Kirsha, please listen. You will be my queen upon your arrival, so I have no right or place to talk to you about this. But please, I beg you to consider how your people will feel. If you do not leave the siblings, we will have no hope of return. We are stuck here, in a prison of our own making. We didn't want our knowledge ill-used or used for ill purposes, but we had no right to lock our knowledge here. We are not a warlike people. We came to the ultrarium to think of how to deal with our enemy, but we cannot come back without you. If you come now, you will be queen, but your people will be without hope." "But Kilty, send her in. We will cure her. We have the antidote already, and it's ready at the gate." "But," Kirsha thought, she realized they had veered off her topic. So she said, "My parents had no right to abandon us to such terrible homes." She heard a sigh. "Kirsha, that is why we hope you can restore our city. The dissenters usually learn the identity of the siblings, but not until the siblings are together. They found after 3 years. It took them a while to actually inhabit your adopting parents, but they did by age 5, I think. Meanwhile, they found Kirian's parents and brainwashed them. For Kilty's parents, the dissenters just got them addicted to drugs. Never before have the siblings had so much trouble. Anyway, I guess you know the rest from there. Yes, I know I was beat almost to death. Kilty wasn't nourished, and Kirian was degraded daily. Well, yes, that too. Even untrained, you still had too much magic for the dissenters to outright attack. At least, many of us Kai believe that. Some believe that the dissenters want to enter our city with you, so they don't actually want to kill you. But I was talking about the time limit on mind inhabitation and brainwashing. 3 years is the maximum without causing death. So there had to be periods of rest where you were with the real people who adopted you. And the brainwashing only stays until something happens for the person to fight and disarm it. Kirsha thought. She knew there were times when her adopting parents would beg for Mr. Vollins to take her away, and other times they didn't even want Mr. Vollins around. She would have to think on it more later. Oh, and congratulations on your marriage to Kirian. He will be a good king to stand at your side. I'm still not sure how I feel about it. That's because you've never seen how your father dotes on your mother. Are you married? Yes, of course, said the voice with a chuckle. Very few Kai are meant for the single life. What's your name? Oh, I'm not important. I'm just a researcher. What is your name? Amy, replied the voice. I need to get back to camp before Kirian comes to check on me, but I want to know if I may talk to you again. Of course, my future queen. You may talk to anyone you choose. Yes, but how did I get you this time? I was walking past the new sphere that contains copies of your parents' orbs. I heard your voice. I didn't know if I could respond, but I touched the sphere and everything seems to have worked. So, I just try again the same time tomorrow? Asked Kirsha. Well, if that is your wish, but we are not bound to schedules like humans. We work like we need to do, but we do so at our peaks, or when we have an inspiration. That means when we do work, we are productive. Oh, replied Kirsha. Well, thanks for talking with me. I like having the different perspective. It was an honor. Kirsha put away her orb. She slowly walked back, thinking through her information. She didn't want to turn Kilty over to strangers, but leaving the siblings would take 14 years, plus pregnancy for the first sibling. Kirsha was not yet pregnant, and she didn't want to get that way. Kirsha thought of Kirian's offer to stay home with Kilty. He said he would gladly go, but knew Kirsha would not stay. But Kirsha realized that it was not a go and come back. They would either have to send Kilty in or let the city trap them with her, with no hope of ever coming out. Amy said she had lived through 3 sets of siblings. So Kirsha wondered how long Kai lived. Kirsha also wondered if a different person would have a different perspective. Maybe there was someone who agreed with her that her parents should not have given them up. Then she wondered if perhaps one or both of her parents had ordered Amy to talk to her. Her parents could have been standing right there with Amy the whole time. When Kirsha walked into the camp, she didn't see anyone. Kirian? Kilty? Kirian came from the other side of the wagon. I'm glad you're back. So, what magic did you release? Kirian, does anyone ever have a good reason for hurting someone? Let me get Kilty tucked in, replied Kirian. He carried Kilty around and tucked her in. He adjusted his and Kirsha's pallets so they were together, and he had Kirsha sit down. After thinking for a few minutes longer, he said, in answer to your question, I would say yes, and I can give an example. Remember when we crossed the funny bridge the first time, and I thought someone might be following us? Yes, replied Kirsha, slightly confused. Well, say someone had been out here, and say that someone tried to hurt you or Kilty. So I killed him or her to protect one or both of you. I'd say that would be a good reason. Kirsha thought through things. What's this about? Pressed Kirian. Kirsha sighed. I'm not sure. I'm just thinking. I want to read tomorrow while we ride. What about the race? Are the leaves at a standstill? For now, replied Kirsha, as she smiled slightly. She was glad to think on the different subject. When we get around something more than sand, the races can continue. Kirsha looked down. She was torn. She did not want to leave Kilty with her parents, even if they had good reasons for leaving them. But she didn't want to leave the siblings either. She looked up at Kirian. He was patiently waiting. She looked down again. Kirian gently lifted her chin. Kirsha took his hand in hers. Kirian, you've been so patient with me, and I want us to get past all this. So at the castle, Kirsha, I'm in no rush. But I mean for Kilty's sake. What? Asked Kirian. He pulled away. He stood and turned his back to her. No, not for Kilty or me. Kirsha followed him the few steps. She tentatively placed her hand on his shoulder. The siblings. Kirian spun around. We are the siblings. Mr. Vakov said so, explained Kirsha. We can't go to the city unless we leave 3 more siblings. Kirian sighed. Did you read that? Or are you assuming that? It said each time the siblings left a set of siblings. But did it say had to or just did? Pressed Kirian. I said I would read tomorrow. Kirian sighed. He pulled her close and hugged her. If we have to leave the siblings, we will. But only when you are ready. Do you understand? Yes. And you were going to help me. We were kissing and sleeping together tonight. Kirian smiled. He took his cue and started kissing her. He knew she was still struggling with her fear. He felt her push against him and then pull him closer. She did that several times, until Kirian kissed wet cheeks. I'm sorry, said Kirsha. Don't apologize, replied Kirian. They lay on their pallets and she snuggled into his arms. Kirian noticed she had a death grip on his shirt. He tried to get her hand to relax several times before he finally went to sleep. In the morning, Kirian leaned over Kirsha and gently kissed her neck. This startled Kirsha awake. She gripped Kirian's shirt tightly in her fist as she pushed against his chest. Kirian froze. I'm sorry, Kirian. Kirian smiled. I don't see any spider mouths or spiders, so you're just startled. Kirsha returned his smile. I'm going to help Kilty with her bandage, stated Kirian. Okay, I'll scout the beach for seagull eggs, responded Kirsha. Kirian nodded. He wasn't going to argue about magic. He would just build a fire. Kirsha reminded herself to at least look, but first she wanted to talk to someone. She would first ask if her parents knew whosoever was talking to her. Kirsha could easily tell a lie herself, and knew that someone could lie to her, especially by talking through these orbs or spheres. But she would ask nonetheless. After Kirsha walked down the beach some way, she took out her orb and sat down. Arik had once again convinced Arisha to leave her orb on its pillow, so she was more willing now. To do that now that she knew her husband was watching the children too. Another lone woman was walking down the street. She was taller than Amy and was walking the opposite direction Amy had the night before. She had just passed the sphere and had not really paid it any attention when she heard, "Hello, is anyone there?" The woman stopped. She turned and looked at the sphere. She almost dismissed the voice when she saw purple light burst through the top of the green and blue swirling all around the sphere. She decided to walk back to the sphere. She leaned over and peered in. She saw the siblings were far apart. She placed her hand on the sphere. "Hello, Kirsha. Why are you so far from Kirian and Kilty?" "Not that you have to answer. I'm just curious." "They don't have orbs, and I'm trying to figure all this out. Now, before we talk, do my parents know you were talking to me?" The woman looked around. I don't know if they know or not." "How can you not know?" "Well, Kirsha, they are not here standing with me in the city center, but they have orbs just like you do, just like most all Kai do. So they could be watching. I don't know. Many times they do watch." "So you have to be careful in how you answer me," pressed Kirsha. "I'm confused, Kirsha. I mean, you have to say what they would say so they don't get upset with you." "Ah, I understand you now. You think Kai react and do as humans do." The woman laughed. "Kirsha, this is something you need to learn very quickly, especially since you have your orb. Kai have to be true to themselves. If you lose yourself and start doing someone else's bidding, your orb will lose its connection to you." "But then, what's the point of the king and queen?" "Kirsha, the queen and king do what's best for their people, and we see their sacrifices. We've seen your pain, albeit we've not seen the extent of it as your mother has. We Kai honor and respect them. If, however, we didn't feel they had us in mind, we would confront them, and they would change or step down." "You mean like when we bring Kilty without leaving the siblings, you would be upset with us, so we shouldn't bring Kilty?" "Oh no, Kirsha. Bring Kilty to us. Just get her permission to keep her orb. You've broken so many known laws of magic, so you can enter without her. I'm sure of it. I've studied the magic for a long time, and I've written several laws myself. Then, once you were born, I had to go back and update old laws." It was Kirsha's turn to say, "I don't understand." The woman sighed. "Let me think. Okay, Kirsha, tell me, if you throw a ball up in the air, what happens?" "It comes down?" "Precisely. No matter how many times you test it, the ball comes down. It's under a law, some call gravity. And the only time the law changes is if you go to a different planet. Now, magic has many laws. We've studied them intensely. We test them over and over. You, however, are using magic in ways we've never seen." "Like calling a rabbit for Kirian to kill?" pressed Kirsha. "Well, no, because though you're not trained, and I don't know how well you can picture things, the rabbit is understandable. Even the when to call Kilty, since that is your specialty, those are within normal boundaries. But the bridge, the boat, the wave of water are outside the normal stuff. Trees don't move and make themselves into boards. Your specialty is wind. I've seen your magic many times, yet you read Kilty's book, understood the words, and worked the spell." "So Kilty didn't work the spell? I just I didn't just add my magic. Kirsha, you did no harm. You need patience. Kilty won't be able to work spells for a while. But Kilty's wound. Yes, I know. We're working here to see if there are things you can do there. We're testing river water versus ocean water. Things will work out. Wait! I have smooth skin. I can fix Kilty's wound. Whoa, Kirsha. Having smooth skin doesn't remove poison. Then I just undo the spell at night when we need to put on herbs. The woman sighed. Kirsha, tell me about the cup. What cup? Well, it was several cups, I guess. The ones you knocked off the table. Were you able to undo your spell? Or did you repair with another spell? There were several moments of silence. Kirsha, I'm not saying your idea isn't marvelous, but it needs more thought, and undoing spells is much harder than repairing a broken cup. There are spells to use the pieces and remake the cup, but that is still different from undoing and putting something back to its previous state. If it is so hard, why did Mr. Volkov tell me to try? He wanted to see what you could do. And it was a cup, dear, not a poisoned wound. Speaking of Mr. Volkov, he should be traveling with you. You three are so unaware of the history and violence of the dissenters. But I guess he will answer to the Queen and King for his decision. I need to get back. Of course, it's not my place to say, but you really shouldn't leave them, especially in the villages. You have the strongest magic. But what is your name? You don't sound like Amy. No, I'm not Amy. I'm Rashima. I hope to talk to you again soon. Soon. Kirsha put away her orb. She wondered if Marian Kyrian was being true to herself. It seemed her orb still worked, so she guessed it was close enough. She got up and dusted off. Right away, she noticed a sand nest nearby with 3 eggs. She gathered the eggs and headed back. When Kirsha returned, Kyrian took the eggs and started cooking them. Kirsha went to Kilty. Kilty, do you remember playing with the Rubens twins and falling on the old jagged wood? Yes. May I see your scar from that? Kyrian glanced over. Yes. Kilty pulled up her sleeve and showed a long, thin scar on her upper arm. Kirsha got Kilty to feel the scar. Do you feel the line where your scar is? Yes. Now, feel your cheek. It is smooth. Kyrian was not sure where Kirsha was going with this. He almost said something. Now, let me show you what I did to myself. She gently caressed Kilty's cheek. She then rubbed her hand along the scar. Kilty felt her arm. She felt her cheek. She raised her arm and tried to look. It's gone? Kirsha smiled. Now your knee. Do you still have a scab from last week or whenever it was? Kilty raised her dress over her knee. Kyrian came over but left the pan. The eggs were small and wouldn't take too long to cook. What are you doing? I'm trying things, stated Kirsha. Look, my scar is gone, said Kilty as she raised her arm. Kyrian smiled at her. I see. There's not one trace of the scar left. Kyrian, I was thinking that if I put skin over her wound, she could get wet. That way she could take a bath or practice magic, but skin won't allow us to put on herbs, stated Kyrian automatically. Well, unless I could undo it, replied Kirsha. The scar is gone. Are you making it come back? He took Kilty's arm and rubbed his hand along it. No, the scar is gone, replied Kirsha. Her body had healed it the best it could, but the scab isn't healed. Kirsha rubbed her hand over the scab. The roughness smoothed out and the knee looked normal. Okay, this was not completely healed. So if I undo this, we should see the wound. Kirsha rubbed the knee again. The scab appeared. Okay, Kilty, pop off the scab. What? Asked Kirian. She does it all the time, stated Kirsha. Yes, and you always tell her not to, protested Kirian. But we need to see the wound. Kilty looked between them and then popped off the pieces of the scab until it was all gone. Kirsha sighed heavily. I'm sorry, Kilty. She got up and walked away. Kilty didn't understand. But my knee is better. Kirian tried to explain. Does it normally look better when you pop off the scab? No, sometimes it even bleeds. Exactly, Kilty. We don't want you to have a wound, but until it's cured, till the poison is gone, we have to put on the herbs every day. If Kirsha put skin over it, then we would have to cut you open to put on herbs. Oh, said Kilty with wide eyes. Not to worry. I have a plan, stated Kirian. Kirsha turned back. And what is that, my dear husband? Kilty is driving the wagon. Kirsha raised her eyebrows, and Kilty cheered. We'll sit up front with her. We will read, and she will drive. Kirsha shrugged. Sounds fine. Really? Squealed Kilty. Good. Now come eat your eggs so we can leave. Soon they loaded the wagon and hitched it to the horse, and then they were continuing their journey. Arisha and Arik went to their father. Well, hello. What brings you here? Kirsha has her orb, replied Arisha. I heard that news, replied Apont. I also heard of the wedding and the Xantrix. Kirsha knows we gave her up, Dad, stated Arisha. She hates us. Yes, well, don't you remember hating your mother and me? Yes, replied Arik. We've come to ask you how to handle it. We thought anger was good. To a point, yes, it is good, replied Apont. The sphere works, and others have talked to Kirsha, put in Arisha. But, well, she paused. Kirsha tests everybody's word, finished Arik. That's good, stated Apont. We wondered if, started Arisha. If you would talk to her too, finished Arik. Finished. I said those two names backwards, but that's okay. What would I say? Asked Apont as he considered this. Answer Kirsha's questions, answered Arisha. Dad, you've studied our history. You have a wealth of wisdom. Kirsha probably won't respond if she's with Kilty or Kirian, put in Arik. But never mind. Children rarely do what they're supposed to do. If we remind her of what she ought, she'll be more likely to not. Apont paused. I'll think about it. Kirsha is so much like Amona in her fiery youth. I miss Amona so much. Apont turned away from them and walked further into the house. Arisha and Arik took their cue and left. Kirian had Kilty stop the wagon for lunch. Kirian spotted a rabbit right away and killed it easily. He felt the wind as he had before. In a way, he wished he hadn't. He wanted to provide lunch for Kirsha and Kilty by his own strength. But he knew Kirsha hadn't consciously thought about it. While the rabbit was roasting on a spit, Kirian told Kirsha everything he had read. At one point, Kilty asked if she was going to have a test on everything. Kirsha told her no, but Kirian wasn't sure if she was joking or not. Then Kirian asked Kirsha what she had read. Kirsha said she was in the middle of something and wasn't sure she understood some things. She promised Kirian that she'd tell them everything the best she could when they stopped for the night. Kirian didn't press her. After they ate, Kirsha said she needed to find a bush to water. She walked down the beach. Kirian just got out Kilty's and his spell books, and they started reading. Apont was in his ceremonial gown. He had all his decorated war pains on. Although Kai weren't warlike, they had fought many wars to protect their lives and prevent the misuse of their knowledge. He walked slowly down the city streets to the center of the city. Apont saw the sphere with the swirling green lights and blue lights. He saw 6 lead scientists sitting in chairs in a semicircle around the sphere. They were taking notes. They took turns watching and writing. Apont walked up to the sphere and peered in. "Ah, Commander, would you like a report?" asked one of the center scientists. The scientist on the far left reported without waiting for a response. Kirsha started the campfire with her magic. Apont motioned. "That's fine. I just came to watch." He looked in the sphere. He noticed Kirsha was not near the other two. He sighed inwardly. He crossed his arms across his chest and watched. Kirsha felt she was far enough away. She took out her orb. She waited for the light. She bathed her right hand in the light for a few minutes. Then she said, "I need answers before I misinform Kirian, and I'm guessing Kilty needs to sleep first." Apont looked around the circle. Every other scientist was writing. The others were watching. None of them were moving to answer. He slowly reached his hand to the sphere. Kirsha heard, "What kind of answers?" The voice sounded like her father's voice, maybe a little deeper. She asked, "Who is this? Is this my father?" "I am your grandfather." "Then you would be king." "No. Both of your parents are stronger than I am." "Why won't my parents talk to me anymore?" "As I understand it, you quite adamantly told them you hated them." "Oh," replied Kirsha. The voice continued. "Usually it isn't wise to push yourself on someone when they clearly tell you such." "Oh," Kirsha said again. "But they did ask me to come and talk to you. I asked them what they wanted me to say, and they told me that you, Kirsha, usually had a topic." "I do have a topic," replied Kirsha. "Proceed, or would you rather talk with someone else?" I guess you are fine. Every time I use this orb, I get someone different." For the first time in a long time, a smile creased across Apont's long face. His eyes even twinkled. He glanced at the scientist. He wondered if he should explain the sphere, but he decided he wasn't the best one suited for that explanation. Apont heard, "Hello? Are you still there? Can you not see me in your orb?" Kirsha gazed into her orb for the first time. She saw little bubbles floating around. She concentrated on one bubble and saw Kilty reading. The image was fuzzy, but Kirsha was sure it was her. Kirsha changed to a different bubble. This time she saw lots of people gathered, and they were listening. "Look for the orblet with both green and blue light," instructed the voice. Kirsha did. She saw a tall, handsome man. He didn't look much older than she guessed her father to be. "Are you sure you're not my father?" "I could ask you the same. Are you sure you're not Amona reborn? You certainly have her beauty and fiery spirit." There were a few minutes of silence. "Well, what information did you need?" "I was told the Kai are not warlike." "That is correct." You've fought the dissenters over and over again, refuted Kirsche. Kirsche, they attack us or steal our information and use it in corrupt or perverse way. But usually there is some reason, sibling rivalry, land disputes. Kirsche fell silent. Tell me what you did to Dr. Highhands. Dr. Highhands? Oh, well, I did take his book. Yes, but that was after he let loose the ravenous Vaporus near your picnic spot. But how do we know that he did it? Think back. 2 months ago, he went to the port town. Supposedly, his aunt was ill or something, and he wanted to send medicine. Then before Kilty described the creature to him, he diagnosed it and showed a picture. But 2 months? He released it near where he thought you went. He could not force the snake to stay and bite, but it was a matter of time. What if someone else had gotten bitten? In war, there are always sacrifices, Aponte said bitterly. I hate fighting and killing. But Dr. Highhands hurt Kilty and will do so again if he isn't stopped. Well, that brings me to what I really don't understand. The book said you couldn't use your magic to kill a dissenter. Why? Before I answer, I will say I'm glad you recovered our book. What you are asking about is a theory, not yet proven. However, Dr. Highhands read it, and the dissenters are trying to test it. At this point, though, I should let a scientist answer. Kirsche saw him motion. She pulled the orb closer and saw 6 people sitting in chairs. Some were writing. Lala, would you explain the theory? Lala stood and walked to the sphere. She placed her hand on it and said, well, it has to do with the life elements contained in the essence of magic. A sword has no such elements. Because of the life elements, some believe that when someone or something pushes life out of a body by magical means, the elements attach themselves to the magic. In theory, such attachment can sustain life, and if in life the being had substantial control over magic, it can in time learn how to use magic again. If this comes to pass, then the life will look for a body to host it. Here comes one of the many divisions of the theory. Some people believe the magic will seek the body that sent it out, meaning the person who cast the spell to kill will become the host to the one whom he or she killed. That makes no sense, stated Kirsche. It's just a theory. We're not sure if the killed being can grasp the magic and return or not. I'm not talking about not returning, put in Kirsche. That part makes sense. I'm talking about trying to make the killer the host of the killed. From what you said, I assume both have magic, and one was stronger in magic, wits, or determination than the other. So what's to say that suddenly the killed is now stronger than the killer? It seems a new war will break out, but this time the war will be within the killer's body. Ah, Kirsche, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. I will let the Queen know the new theory right away. Commander Rivas will like that as well. Kirsche saw the woman walk away. What other information did you want? Came the voice of her grandfather. What just happened? I asked a question. Yes. As a true scientist, you asked a question. A very legitimate question. Now, we have something else to consider. We have another option. Commander Rivas asked us to kill him because he was afraid Farsnile, a strong dissenter, was trying to return. Your mother refused his request. None of us thought she was wrong with her refusal, but some are very fearful of Farsnile and his return. Thank you, Kirsha, for your insight. If you are right, then Commander Rivas will be the first to know and the first to fight. I'd like to think you were right about Commander Rivas won the first time, so he has a good chance to win again. If Farsnile is able and trying to return, put in Kirsha. Yes, well, if it is possible. Farsnile has the greatest possibility of returning. Thanks for everything. I need to return to Kirian and Kilty. Yes, well, if you have to leave them to speak to people, you should at least watch them in the orblets of them. Sure, I'll do that. Bye. Kirsha closed the view on her orb and slipped it back into the needle that hung around her neck. She dropped it back under her dress. Shortly after she returned, they packed the wagon and left. Kilty again drove. Kirian and Kirsha read. Apont stayed standing at the sphere. His arms were across his chest as he gazed in. Soon Arisha and Arik joined him. What do you think, Dad? Started Arisha. Do you think Kirsha has a valid theory? Kirsha wasn't given all the divisions of thought, but assuming that division is true, then yes, I followed her system of thought. All three stared into the sphere. The 5 remaining scientists continued watching and taking notes. Kirian felt Kirsha had been reluctant to share her information more than she didn't understand it. So when they stopped, he didn't say anything. He waited for Kilty and Kirsha to go to sleep. Then he retrieved the book, City of the Ancients, and started reading. He read until his eyes wouldn't stay open. Then Kirian rolled out his blanket next to Kirsha and fell asleep. Well, writers, that's the end of chapter 11. I feel like I built quite a lot of climax in this chapter. Before you heard a little bit about the dissenters, but not so much. Our main concern or main problem for the characters was Kilty's wound. And even the wound doesn't seem to be too much of a problem at this point. But now with this chapter, we have added things that the characters need to do. Yes, the cure is in the city. It is even at the gate. Kirsha and Kirian have to make a choice of letting Kilty go to the city alone, or Kirsha and Kirian have to actually restore the city to their dimension. This decision is causing a lot of conflict for Kirsha. The other thing is dissenters, which are enemies of the Kai or the Ancients. And the dissenters have the potential to return, or could have the potential to return, depending on which theory is correct. We're actually around 100 pages in the story at this point, and there hasn't been a lot of action. I don't write action adventures, or at least I haven't yet. So far in this story, I've done a lot of character development and giving the reader insight to the characters and the characters' history, which I think is important. Things can't just happen for no reason. You have to have reasons for things. People say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So as a writer, you have to decide what part of the picture you want to give your readers. Leave a comment as to what theory you have. Can the dissenters return to their full self? Will the dissenters take over the body of the ancient? I hope you enjoyed Storytime today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell to continue writing with me. If you're exchanging chapters, then send your chapter 11 to writewithmykela@gmail.com. I will enjoy reading your chapters. If you've sent your other chapters, then don't leave me hanging. If you need more fun until my next video, then visit my website at www.bymykela.com and read some character bios. Join me on Tuesday. We will discuss idioms, which can be fun. It also has to do with your time frame or your setting. So we have to be careful which idioms we choose to use. But idioms are fun. Join me Friday for Chapter 12. The Chase Begins. From the story City of the Ancients. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Mykela with Write with Mykela. Bye for now.